Hi, everybody. It's Stacey Soble with Salonology, and today I have a really special guest. I have Genein Letford, and she is going to be one of the keynote speakers at Serious Business in January 16th and 17th. And you are an expert in and you help train corporations on intercultural creativity. What does that mean?
That is a new term that I am bringing forth, and it's going to be a very powerful term for this next era. World Economic Forum listed creativity as the #1 skill needed in the workforce, and a lot of people are having issues with that word because for a lot of times we think creativity is only artistry, right? Singing, dancing, painting, and things like that. And so I'm first of all bringing forth the new definition of creativity, meaning the process of problem finding and problem solving with relevance, value, and novelty, really looking at those new ideas within the field that people are working for. And the intercultural comes part in another aspect or a definition that we need to define. When people think of culture, we only think of ethnic culture or national culture, but culture is just a group of people with just defined values, beliefs, and systems that they've agreed upon. So you have your beauty culture, right? Your tech culture, even your soccer mom culture. And so looking at how we can be creative together with people with different lived backgrounds, different experiences, different hair textures, and things along those lines. How do we come together to create? Because now we're in a global society where we have to know how to create together.
Now, when I think creativity, I naturally think stylists are pretty creative because that is their field. They are artists. But now you've kind of redefined that for me. So that's a little interesting. So in the sense of a salon, how would intercultural creativity drive that aspect and change?
Sure. So I still want to be clear that artistic creativity is a part of creativity, and salons and people in the beauty field are very, very creative because you are producing new ideas. You're producing new styles, new layouts, new trends, right? And where the world is really looking to see just new ways to represent themselves and new ways to communicate. Artistry to me is a form of communication, and I believe the beauty industry is along those same lines. You're communicating different things about your personality through your hair, your makeup, your clothes. And so when I think about intercultural creativity in the beauty industry, and especially in the salon industry, is how do we take a step back and really look at our field with a new eye, a new lens, just a new way of recreating, helping people recreate themselves. Last year has been a doozy of a year and people are reinventing themselves. So how does the beauty industry come in alignment with that and allow their field and their expertise to help people reinvent the new you?
Now, what is the owner's role in kind of, I watched a few of your videos and you were talking about kind of clearing the field of bias and opening it up. So what's the owner's role in doing that, and how do they do that, or how do they begin to?
Sure. The beauty of my work is it's all based on neuroscience, and I'm very hands-on, so I even have a brain here for those people who are listening. And so I really am in the background of psychology, neuroscience, and education. And so I bring the brain research into it because I want people to understand what's going on in their brain when they're coming into grips with how they're reinventing themselves. And to be aware that the brain has bias. If you're a human, if you have a brain, you have a bias. And so a lot of times biases, especially negative ones, can really just block our thinking, and it can block other ways of seeing things. It can also separate us from going into new experiences. So the #1 indicator of a highly creative person is openness to new experiences. And the #1 indicator of a highly intercultural competent person is openness to people with different lived experiences. And so if we have unconscious bias or even conscious bias that's keeping us from engaging in these new experiences or keeping us from engaging with people with different lived experiences and different ways of seeing things, we're actually shooting ourselves in the foot, creatively speaking. And so the salons of the future, the salons that are going to really push the envelope, are those owners who are purposely putting themselves maybe in uncomfortable situations that are like, it's new, you don't know the schema, you don't know the layout, you don't know the culture, but you're there to learn and you're curious. And I talk about that in my 7 gems of intercultural creativity, where I lay out the 7 fundamental cognitive skills that owners need really to embrace the new era that we're headed into. So curiosity is a big one. Perspective shifting is a big one. And as we mentioned in our pre-show talk, that the demographics are changing. And if demographics are changing, the needs are changing, and the styles and the trends will be changing as well. So the owners who are aware of these intercultural creative aspects are going to be on the forefront.
Can you share some of those statistics with us?
Sure. I call them the gems. My company is Cafe Strategy. So the diamond is our logo.
You really do have a prop for every answer.
I do. I have my background in elementary education. So if you ever worked with 4-year-olds and elementary kids, you have to be interactive and make sure you show things.
It works great on Zoom too, though, right?
Yes. And now that I work with adults, learning is fun. Learning should always be fun. So I just bring this into my trainings now. But our logo is a diamond. And the reason I don't just have a diamond because it's pretty and, we love diamonds, but I use this metaphorically to say, number one, we all should shine bright as a diamond, and we're all multifaceted. And if you look at the work of Malcolm Gladwell, who has a great book called The Tipping Point, he actually brings up people in the beauty industry. He brings up salon workers as critical positioned people who are on the boundaries. And so my 7 gems, and that's why I brought this up to let you know that the 7 gems of intercultural creativity end up at that position. And so the first gem is mindset. You have to believe that you can grow in your creativity. It's a skill, so that means it can be developed. Intercultural competency is a skill, so you can work on it. The second one is empathy, having an open mind and an open heart. Empathy is big within your field. You have to have people who know how to connect with their clients and with other people in their field. The third one, which really hasn't been talked about a lot, is observation. When you think about it, just your physical senses and also your intuition. And so a lot of times our observational skills are dulled, especially by technology. We have our phones in front of our faces, so we're not paying attention to the patterns that are around us. So you can actually train your observational skills to be better. The next one is curiosity. They say if creativity is the driver of innovation, curiosity is a driver of creativity. So how curious are your owners of your salons? How curious are your employees that really bring these new ideas, these new perspectives to the table? And so we're looking at that. And then the next one is perspective shifting. And I have someone on my podcast, the Create and Grow Rich podcast, Dr. Michael Platt, and he's out of the Wharton School of Business, and he's a neuroscientist. And he says that people who know how to shift perspectives correctly and well, those are the ones who are going to be coming in with the new ideas, because they're able to really see things from different positions. They're able to have that advantage because they're increasing their advantage points. And so we really look at perspective shifting as a skill, and you can grow it. The 6th one is authentic adaptation, people who know how to adapt their behavior in different cultural situations. And the last one is one that I mentioned at the very beginning, where Malcolm Gladwell specifically mentions salon owners and people in the beauty industry, that you want to be a bridge builder. You want to be people who are riding the boundary lines, and you have your foot in different fields. And so this reminds me of the book by Franz Johansson called The Medici Effect, where he says innovation lies at the intersection of fields, disciplines, and cultures. And when you think of salon beauty industry personnel, you see people who have attachments and have networks of people in all types of fields. And so that's where the creativity happens, because they're getting all this data from all these different sources and all these different experiences. So the owners who really open themselves up to that will be your owners who are on the creative forefront.
Great. Well, Malcolm Gladwell has been a former speaker at Serious Business, so you're in good company.
I'm honored to share the stage with him. He is definitely a bright light in the world of creative thinking and psychological advancement.
Now, I imagine when you do your workshops and you talk about these 7 gems, there are exercises that you take the audience through around. Can you share one for one of those gems that you do?
Sure, sure. I sat down with Mitch Cohan, and he's the author of The Self-Made Billionaire, how people produce massive value. And he sat down with 20 self-made billionaires and looked for traits of thinking. And the first trait they found was empathetic imagination. And so I'm big on imagination training. As adults, we don't really see imagination as important. We just, that's the kids, they're using their imagination.
Right.
But if you look at everything in your office, if you look at everything in your salon, it started in someone's imagination. And so who really wakes up and says, I'm going to do 20 minutes of imagination training, right? That's really not a top thing that people say, but that's one of the exercises that I do. And when you look at the brain, when the imagination is turned on, your innovation network is turned on. That's when the ideas come in. And so one that is attached to like bias and how we see bias is I have people close their eyes and they imagine that they're going into a house. Now they have the title. If you're born at the beginning of the year, the first 6 months, you are a prospective home buyer. If you're born in the last part of the year, you are a burglar. And so we enter the house in our imagination, but they have 2 completely different identities. That changes the way you interact with the house, right? It changes the way you experience the going through the house, correct?
Right.
And so I bring that up, and that's that's extreme identities, but I bring that up with the diamond to say everyone you meet has multiple facets they're seeing the world through. So someone with a doctorate degree might have a different experience than someone with a 6th grade education, right? Someone who is going through the world with one ethnicity may have a different experience than someone else with a different ethnicity, or someone with multiple languages. So being mindful of that different lenses affect the way you go through experiential activities is key.
So if you're an owner and you have someone on your staff who needs some help in this area, how do you get them to shift their perspective? Because that's kind of ingrained.
Yes. So shifting perspectives is a skill, which means it can be developed. And that's where it goes to the first gem of the creative growth mindset of, first of all, seeing if people are even open to this type of development. That's the first step. And there's an assessment that my company gives. It's called the IDI, the Intercultural Development Inventory. And it actually assesses you on where your intercultural competent orientation is, whether you're in a mono cultural mindset, or whether you're in a more advanced intercultural global mindset. And the main thing is to not penalize people, because it's a continuum. You would not penalize a 5-year-old child for not being fluent in trigonometry, correct?
Right.
Because developmentally that child is not there yet, but eventually if they get the training and the experience, they can do the work eventually. And so it's the same way. There's some people who are they just got great exposure in their formative years, the 0 through 12, critical years for both creative thinking and intercultural competence. But they just were around different people of different experiences. They may have traveled, they may have been put in experiences where they had to take some risk, and they had to really see that growth mindset ability that they have. I say that I'm not the inventor of intercultural creativity. My mother is, because she produced a home where we had to work on these skills inherently. Yeah. Some people had that growing up. Some people not so much. They may have been in an area where everyone looked like them, everyone, just everything was the same, more or less. And so if that's the case, number one, that's the case. Being mindful and being aware of that is the first step, and not judging it, and slowly adding more experiences to their experience sheet. And so having different just guidelines, not guidelines, like having different, what would you call them? Just experiences. Yeah, just
Yeah.
opportunities is the word I'm looking for. Having different opportunities for people to get out, allowing people to go to conferences that are in their field, but that's not in their field as well. Allowing people to go
Right.
on just on ethnic excursions where you experience, you know, certain time. You can start with the easier fun stuff, like certain types of foods, languages, customs, things like that. And for your more advanced interculturally competent people, you know, start having those difficult conversations, those uncomfortable conversations that really help you see other people's perspective and other people's lived experiences. But don't bring on the difficult conversations with someone who is more at the beginning levels. So that's why the IDI assessment is so great, because you can see where their orientation is.
That's very interesting. I'd love to give that quiz to my family. And I mean, when I grew up, I was big on imagination. I had imaginary friends. I mean, we didn't have all the technology to play with and you had to create your own world to play in, kind of. And I played a lot by myself or with my sibling. We didn't have friends over every afternoon. And today's kids seem to be different. I mean, they're all connected online. There's a lot of play dates set up for them, but I don't know, my own kids didn't seem as creative to me growing up as I felt I was. And I didn't really know how to foster that.
There's actually studies out of NASA, JPL NASA, which is located in Pasadena, and they saw that their scientists, engineers, about around the 70s or so, they were, you know, getting older and starting to retire. And the new engineers coming in around the maybe the 90s or the 2000s, they started to realize they weren't problem solving as creatively as the older ones, you know, the ones who sent the man to the moon. And they really looked at why, and they found out it was due to play in their childhood. So the older scientists and engineers had exactly what you were talking about. They were taking things apart. They were taking apart old radios and putting it back together. A lot of soapbox making, a lot of imaginary play with their hands. Whereas the kids now, even if you do take apart a radio, it's not the same experience because of the technology. You know, it's more of a flat interface as opposed to the radios of 40 years ago, correct? And just not outside as much, and that hands-on play wasn't as profound as it was in the 70s and earlier. So it had a huge effect on the way that the engineer and the scientists were operating in their adulthood because of their play. And so once I really read that research, I have a 3-year-old now who is co-writing a book with me called I Am Creative. And but because of that, we're now like, I'm trying to tell parents and caregivers and anyone who, you know, teachers, that we need to be very mindful of what they do during their formative years, because it affects the way that they think and the way they interact with their job, right, and their businesses in their adult years. So how do we not squash their creativity, and how do we put them in situations where they have to imagine, right? They have to be bored for a little bit. Boredom is okay, and start to create these imaginary worlds inside of their mind.
That's fascinating. Well, salons tend to kind of live in a bubble. Obviously, they have their clients, but there is a big group of owners who go to lots of conferences and events, but they tend to be the same people, you know, at event that you see. And I know there's a huge population of people that don't get outside their bubble. So how do they drive their team to be more creative, maybe interact with other salons in the community, or do something that goes beyond their own self-contained bubble?
So one thing about creativity is the audacious, crazy ideas are the ones that really start to roll the ball towards the ideas that you can implement and are actually something. So we have to give ourselves freedom to really think big and crazy. Like, we call it, the street term is like mashup, like how do you mash two ideas? Like, how would you mash food and hair and a hairdo, and I think there are some, I remember seeing some shows, there are some shows that they have that, and those are fun, and it really gets you just, of course they're fun, but it really gets you thinking creatively. And of course, you're not going to put, a hamburger on someone's head and actually go to, the mall or something, but it just starts, it's that catalyst that starts that fun, creative ideas that can work you into something that can actually be implementable. And like we said at the beginning, we're in a new era. We're in a new era of thinking. We're in a new era of what people expect. People are shifting their priorities right now. And so salons being ahead of the game and giving their employees time to think, that is a huge one. There's tons of research of, you want us to be more creative, but we don't have time to think. And so when your employees are daydreaming, don't think they're just wasting time. Their innovation network is actually turned on, and their ideas are going in and out and through one another and combining and recombining. So you're in either your focus network or your innovation network. And so we need more time to allow our innovation network turn on. And that's why I don't, pull my son out of his daydreaming, like, Sean, snap out of it. I don't do that anymore, because he's in his thoughts, and his thoughts are creating. So I'm very mindful about that. So allowing our people to think, and also, like I said before, allowing them to go to events that are not inside of the beauty industry, of engineering events, or even a plumbing conference. You'd be surprised of just how the brain starts to make connections. And so you're allowing your subconscious to pull from different areas. But if you're not exposing yourself to anything outside of your field, your brain can't pull in this data. Another thing is, even though I said, creativity isn't solely artistry, I'm a huge advocate for the arts. And here's why. Adam Grant wrote a great book called Originals, How Nonconformists Move the World. He is an organizational psychologist. And what he looked at, the top Nobel Prize winners in science, and about 80% of them had a huge background in the arts, even though they weren't artists in their main job. And I have an arts background. I'm a musician. I taught music for years, even though I'm not a professional musician. And the reason why the arts are critical is because it honed your observational skills. It honed your skills for perspective shifting. It honed your skills for pattern recognition and pattern forming. And so people who, they sing or play an instrument or they've painted, if you look at George Washington Carver, who was a great inventor and botanist, he was a great musician and a painter, won global painting awards, which people don't know. They just know him as the peanut guy, right?
Right.
And so I tell people, take an arts class, take a dance class. The body is an instrument of thought. And yes, it's fun, but you're also training your brain to see things that other people are missing. And so those are a few ideas.
That's interesting, because when you think of some of the great thinkers of all time, like Leonardo da Vinci, like he was like an engineer, but he was a painter, and he embraced a lot of different things. So
yes. And of course, the last one that I have to mention, because I am intercultural creativity, is being aware of your exposure to people with different lived backgrounds. Bringing up George Washington Carver, who was born in slavery in 1865 and ended up, painting and then learning botany. He was called on by President Roosevelt. He was called on by Gandhi. He was called on by the greats. But he spent his career working with former enslaved people and teaching them how to cultivate the land and how to farm. That is huge. He spent time with diplomats, and he also spent time with people who were, just coming up into their own freedom. And so people's ability to shift cultures, and that's an example, great example of shifting cultures is key. Can you hang out with the Queen of England, and can you hang out in Queens, New York, on the sidewalk, talking to someone about their hair or about their whatever? Can you shift cultures that way? And so the one way to practice that skill is to get out there and meet people with different cultures, not just ethnicities, but different education levels, different fields, positions, jobs, things along those lines.
So essentially putting yourself in situations that may feel a little uncomfortable, but
Yes.
realizing that you're learning and stretching from that experience.
Yes. Very true. Very true.
Great. Well, Genein, thank you so much. I can't wait to hear you speak at Serious Business and learn about your 7 gems and dig into those a little deeper. And I'm so glad that you were able to share a little bit with us today.
Yes. Well, I will see you there because it is serious business with this intercultural creativity. So thank you all. And thanks to Carol and Serious Business for allowing me to share all of this great work.
And New Orleans is a wonderful city to stretch culturally and creatively. There's a lot there.
Very true. I actually live there. So it is a great town to express your creativity.
Thank you so much.
Bye.